and others in the Trump orbit all tried to use their connections with the Trump organization to profit from Russia, which was openly seeking relief from sanctions. That was not only dangerous, it was un-American. Greed corrupts. Greed corrupts, and it is a terrible foundation for developing American foreign policy.
During his questioning of former special counsel Robert Mueller, Democratic Congressman Denny Heck focused on what he called an underlying motive for the Trump administration to work with Russia, and that was greed. Congressman Heck accused several members of the Trump organization of using their positions for benefit, something Mueller would not confirm.
Mueller did, however, call the Trumps' praise for stolen WikiLeaks material, quote, disturbing. When asked about the future election interference, he said more countries are developing capabilities to replicate Russia's interference. Joining us with his reaction to the former special counsel's testimony is Congressman Denny Heck. He serves on the House Intelligence Committee and the House Financial Services Committee. Congressman, thank you so much for joining us.
You're welcome.
Congressman, what was your main takeaway from the hearing yesterday? The resounding opinion seems to be that the special counsel was very disappointing and that anybody who's driving to impeachment really found a major roadblock here.
So my takeaway was one of sheer exhaustion, frankly. In 7 years in the Congress, I cannot recall a more intense day than I've experienced than yesterday. I thought it was incredibly exhausting for those of us who were leaning into it. We sat and watched every minute of the Judiciary Committee deliberations, and then, of course, I had the privilege to participate in the Intelligence Committee. I think there were two real substantive takeaways, the first of which is the Judiciary Committee established, I think, in excellent fashion the clear and compelling case that the President did, in fact, engage in obstruction of justice. And I thought the main takeaway of the Intelligence Committee was greed was a principal motivator here, that we had a lot of players on both sides of the fence who were behaving as they did and not with good intent, with the pure objective of acquiring more money. The President and all those around him, the President, Trump Tower, Moscow, but Mr. Flynn, Mr. Manafort, and the list goes on. And on Russia's side, seeking to gain sanctions relief. And let's stop and remember what that means. That means a bunch of billionaire oligarchs get to make even more money because they're the ones that the sanctions are actually pinching. So I think those were the two main takeaways.
Sure.
Congressman, you once said, I think we are in full-blown Manchurian Candidate territory here. Do you still stand by that?
I doubled down on it. If anything, I think it was revealed even more, in fact, by the information that was revealed yesterday. Of course, I meant that figuratively. What we have is a president acting out of pure self-interest, in the first instance, in order to solicit by encouraging, welcoming, and benefiting from help that the Russians provided him in the 2016 presidential election, and secondly, in order to achieve, again, profit. He stood to gain many millions of dollars on the Trump Tower deal, which has been a lifelong dream of his to construct in Moscow.
Congressman, Special Counsel Robert Mueller had a lot of trouble recalling word even conspiracy. He wasn't familiar with very basic facts that anybody who covers this story would know. Are you confident that he actually guided the investigation, or does it look to us like now his staff was really the one who was behind most of this?
Robert Mueller is a great American. Robert Mueller has devoted his entire life to public service. He is a smart, caring individual who is a patriot of the highest order. I have the utmost confidence that his leadership of this investigation was done in nothing but the most professional of manner, and the work product reflects that. Our interaction with him reflects that. Look, just because somebody isn't an actor on camera for a committee hearing doesn't mean that the substance of their work is in any way affected. This is a world-class guy.
No one is doubting his service, his patriotism, his commitment to this country. However, we're even seeing reporting from the New York Times this morning that indicates he was not working the hours that some of his aides knew that he used to work, that others of his aides were leading some of the key meetings. Were you aware of that in any way? I mean, this is just very different from the way that he was portrayed in the media and, frankly, by Democrats. Were you aware that a lot of the work was being handled by his aides?
Well, I assumed a lot of the work was handled by his aides. After all, at its peak, it had something like 40 investigators engaged in it. This was a whole of team effort to produce this report. What matters here, frankly, is the cogency and the competence with which the report was put together, and in fact, it speaks for itself.
Well, if the report spoke for itself, why was his testimony even necessary? I mean, the metaphor that has been portrayed a lot today has been that, you know, the movie was supposed to be better than the book because the American people didn't seem to care about the book, and now both are duds. What is your response to that?
So what I've said all along is having the report is a little bit like having the sheet music without having heard the song. I think, in fact, we did hear the song yesterday. Director Mueller, throughout all the years that he's testified before Congress, has an incredible reputation, not just for intelligence and integrity, but also for being a man of few words, which he demonstrated again yesterday. But there were a lot of things that he revealed yesterday I thought that were of significant importance, beginning with, for example, yes, the president is subject to indictment after he leaves office for these acts of obstruction of justice, and also the way in which he said that it was problematic as an understatement that the president would come out and endorse the behavior of WikiLeaks in supporting Russian interference in our campaign. He'd indicated that he wouldn't speak outside the four corners of his report, but in fact, I think you saw that on a number of occasions he actually did take at least tiptoe outside the four corners of the report.
So, Congressman, now that we do know the extent to which the aides were really running the show on the team, do we need to hear from the aides? What's next?
So, as has been reported in open sources, we have in fact already heard from one of the top aides in the Intelligence Committee in a classified briefing. It would be our objective to talk to some of the others as time goes on, but we'll just have to see whether or not that's going to be possible. I think it is desirable. I think the other victory yesterday was a victory on behalf, frankly, of openness and transparency. I think the American public was entitled and deserved to hear this conversation, and I'd like to see that replicated in some form with additional personnel.
Well, thank you so much for joining us, Congressman. We appreciate your time.
You're welcome.
Next up on Rising, on June 29th, a political rally in Portland turned violent, leaving several people, including journalist Andy Ngo, seriously injured.
Ngo now says he was marked as a target for violence at the protest. He tells us about his visit to Capitol Hill and the case against his attackers when Rising continues.